now we have a student who's finishing a degree in interdisciplinary studies with concentrations in environmental studies, creative writing, and poetics. Please invite Andrew Greenfeld to the stage.
As I see it, humanity is at a very interesting point in our history. We're teetering on the start of something very different. And it's either going to be this new era of enhanced intolerance, enhanced oppression, and instability, where those who are already marginalized find themselves much worse off, and those who aren't marginalized certainly do find themselves marginalized. Or a more liberating renaissance that's of benefit to really everyone. And in order to make sure it's this, we're going to need more of a systemic overhaul. And that systemic overhaul goes by the name of post-scarcity. So I wrote my thesis and did my research on the interim period between now and then. And of course, this begs the question, what's post-scarcity? What's this phrase that this swarthy man is saying? Well, post-scarcity is where the exclusive use of renewable energy, love having this laser by the way, the exclusive use of renewable energy, automation being heavily used for labor, and zero-waste circular resource consumption eliminate the need for wealth and markets as a means of delegating resources. So everyone's just kind of free and not bound by our modern technological and financial constraints to follow the work our hearts most desires. And when you say, oh, I'm majoring in creative writing, no one goes, oh, what's your plan there? That's interesting. So a prime example, post-scarcity thinkers love this, solar technology. Here's how this is a great way to show how wealth is eliminated in post-scarcity. If you have a solar-powered factory, you're getting energy from a limitless resource, so there's no scarcity and there's no cost. If the solar panels are made by automated labor, installed by automated labor, etc., then there's no labor cost associated with them. And if the resources for the solar panels don't have to come from constant extraction, but just this circular use of essentially this resource pool that is the existing installations, then there's no cost really to anything, right? There's nothing to limit, there's no delegation needed. And then this applies to the machines that make the panels themselves, can be made with clean energy that doesn't cost anything, and automated labor that doesn't cost anything, and constantly recycled, and the machines that make the machines, and et cetera, and so forth. So there are a few principles and ideas to kind of get out of the way. First is the permaculture principle of stacking functions. It's exactly what it sounds like. You take something that does one thing but can also do other things. So you have this example I love. It's, servers, like I'm hacking into the server where like the internet lives. So they use a lot of electricity and a lot of hot water, and it kind of just goes to nothing. But Microsoft did a feasibility study. You can take that and just attach it to existing hot water installations and these things called data furnaces, and you can do these computations required for the internet to exist, but also heat a home or heat water. You have photovoltaics, floating solar photovoltaics that produce water but also shield from excessive evaporation. And then vegetation to remove the urban heat island effect can be done with vegetation that is productive. And a thesis presentation can be turned into a drinking game by using the phrase solar panels too many times. There we go. So the next most important thing to know when understanding post-scarcity and the future ahead of us is exponential growth. So let's say hypothetically we lived in a dimension where millennials could have $1,000 in their bank account. So let's say that happened. At a 20% compounding interest rate over 10 years, eventually you have $7,000. Solar panels take the same process but in reverse by decreasing costs. Every time the cumulative installations double, the price goes down 20%, which means installations happen faster, which means it doubles faster, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's doubling exponential functions. So if on May 1st, a penny was put in my hypothetical bank account that I could have, and they said, here's the deal, we'll only give you a penny, but if you agree to this deal, it doubles every day until the end of the month. That's a good deal, because today, I'd have 32 cents, but by the end of the month, I'd have $10.75 million. So this is the same pattern that computers have followed. It's why this thing in my pocket could beat Deep Blue, the first supercomputer to beat a chess champion, like easily. And it's how technological advances happen. They compound on each other. Computers make it easier to do the computations to make better computers, or the computations to make better batteries for mobile computers, and then the boost batteries. It all kind of comes together. And AI and automation follow this trend. Real quick, I feel like when I'm saying AI, what you're picturing is like a cowboy that falls in love with the guy from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia and then goes crazy and murders people. I'm not talking about that. That's not what we're about to experience. What we're about to experience is like a toaster that's like, oh, hey, Andrew, I know exactly how you like your toast, and I get better at giving you toast, and I use a little less energy over time, and I have to tell other toasters how to be good toasters. That's it. That's it. So, I don't have time for all 4 of these quotes. They're all great, look them up. But the one that I am going to say is the one that stuck with me and helped me the most in my life, from Leslie Knope, who said, when your back's against the wall and the odds are stacked against you, you swing the hardest. You go big or go home. And to that effect, the first step is in moving forward in our future and making these major changes is getting money out of politics. This is really simple. Whether it's done with an amendment to the Constitution or public financing or whatever, it's what has to happen. Otherwise, we're stuck in this sort of regressive situation that we're in now, and everything moving forward is stuck in this really narrow window. So, as we expand that window, we can start to change economic policy. So as you're all familiar with, income inequality and wealth inequality are a disaster right now, and potentially they're about to get a lot worse from people displaced by AI and automation. Initially, you have mostly the high school or less crowd being displaced, but very quickly you expand to some things you might not expect. Among them, I'm not quite sure if this is on this list, but being a lawyer, or being an accountant, or being in finance, they're all things that can be automated within the next 10 to 15 to 20 years. So we need to expand our social safety net. Obviously, there are gaps in it right now. We have to fill those. But then also be able to address the issues that are to come. And most importantly, to set a precedent for how post-scarcity will work. It will not be the rich get the products of this free society and everyone else is left to fend. It has to be an equitable distribution, otherwise it would just collapse anyway. And to finance these safety nets, potential job programs and job trainings, there are a lot of different ways. We can reform capital gains tax, reform corporate tax, corporate offshore loopholes, and anyone's offshore loopholes, millionaire tax brackets, increasing those. Robin Hood tax is one that I'm very fond of. It's a 0.5% tax on every financial transaction that Wall Street conducts. There are wild variations on how much that would generate depending on how it would affect the activity, but we are looking at a minimum of like $150 billion to anywhere to like 375. That's just that tax reform. So as far as policy reform goes, the environment, that thing that if it died, we'd die. So one work project that would be pretty great is HVDC lines to connect the country in a national grid. HVDC lines can go over 1,000 miles without losing efficiency, which is helpful because if you look at America, like if you were planning to like come to a new planet, like we found a duplicate Earth, you would settle in America because that's where your renewable energy potential is going to be the best. The problem is it's not like all evenly distributed. It's sort of all over the place. But this connects that and allows us to have these sort of smaller community microgrids that are then connected on a national level. This system completely eliminates coal, largely eliminates natural gas, and brings electricity emissions down 80%, also known as 1.5 billion tons a year, and is about 1/6 less expensive than conventional electricity. Combining this with smart appliances that can regulate themselves, use their energy more efficiently through that sort of toaster learning to be a better toaster phenomenon, and also utilize their energy use based on when renewables are available and when they're not. This is also an important time to bring up encryption and data security. Real quick, we're going to need that. We're going to need better data to run a better society and better usage of it, but it's going to have to be anonymous. This is possible. We just have to make it the law. And speaking of making things the law, we have a revenue-neutral carbon tax. This is a carbon tax, but instead of just going to the government directly, it's immediately redistributed in monthly payments to households. So you tax, say, an oil company or utility who's directly using it, and then you get it every month, with the tax increasing to mitigate the decrease in emissions so that everyone is constantly getting more money. And this has been found to be agreeable to liberals and conservatives, which is crucial. Other things include ending planned obsolescence. I'm generally of the belief that our products would last longer if they weren't actively designed to break. And banning single-use plastic and encouraging right-to-repair laws. This is where we get to the crux of the interim, AEVs, or automated electric vehicles. Essentially, fleets of vehicles owned by vertically integrated auto manufacturers and fleet managers. This is the most crucial part of the interim, in my opinion, because it saves $5,600 per household. It reduces tailpipe emissions 90%. So if we didn't do that smart grid thing and just kept our carbon levels the same in our electricity, a net effect of minus 1 billion tons only. But with that smart grid, a net effect of minus 1.5 billion tons. So we're talking about replacing 95% of passenger miles. Here's what a passenger mile is. If there are 2 people in a car going half a mile, they've gone 1 passenger mile. If there's 1 person going 1 mile, they've gone 1 passenger mile. So as you can see, there's an increase. This is mostly actually projected to be from people who right now are disenfranchised by our transportation system and are now able to access the transportation needs. And we're also talking about a technology, so this can be integrated into public systems. So by 2030, we're looking at 95% of passenger miles done with these AEV fleets, and that 90% reduction in emissions. We've got everyone saving $5,600 every household. Who doesn't love that? And we've got some other really important benefits. So right now, environmentalism has this problem where everyone just kind of comes out and says, you're going to die, everyone you know is going to die, and you have to completely change your life in the name of Mother Gaia, and somehow that has not been effective in solving our current problem. So this is the opportunity the environmental movement has been looking for. This is the rebranding of the century, of the millennium. We go from environmentalism as, just wash out the plastic and the recycling and get solar panels, but it'll take forever to pay back. No. Just get in a car, let a robot drive you wherever you're going to go, but you have to, in exchange, save $5,600. So now we can make utopia and environmentalism synonymous. This also cuts to the heart of one of the most powerful forces behind consumerism, the concept of I need to own. Because now you don't need to own. Shared distribution becomes sexy, becomes attractive. It's a great starting point. And there aren't just these floofy little, oh hey, societal culture benefits. There's some real benefits happening. Right now, we're using 3,600 square miles of this country to park cars, where they sit all day and do nothing. These AEV fleets would drive 10 times as much per car. So that's essentially 26 million cars instead of, 220 million, and then a remaining 19 million legacy privately owned vehicles, meaning 1/6 the space is needed for parking, meaning 3,000 square miles of urban land are available for beneficial development, including urban farms, but also houses and businesses and anything, which increases walkability because everything's denser, everything's closer together, increases community cohesion because everything's closer, everything's denser, decreases need for vehicles, and this is a phenomenon that has the potential for 6.6 million homes to be built. That's how much you could build on this land, or 20 million apartments, assuming you only build one story. And of course, developers are going to seize this opportunity because, practically speaking, it's free real estate. So, this brings us to an important tenet of post-scarcity, relocalization. Tool libraries are a great idea, but nobody does them. So now, tool libraries, maybe even appliance libraries, recreation libraries, it all comes together as part of this larger movement of, hey, wouldn't it be easier to not have to own stuff and to just kind of share things, but not in like a commie way, in like a utopia robot way? Isn't that fun? Which encourages zero waste. You don't have to have excessive manufacturing. All this is powered by these local renewable microgrids. And if you're thinking, okay, this is a thought I had a while back. How is localization going to work, right? Because everything we use, right, like this thing, this little baby, has almost every element on the periodic table, you know, that with all the colors and numbers you don't understand because that's why you're here. This little baby. So where are you going to get that? The answer right now is you just go all over the world and mine this here and find it there and mine this here and find it there. And here's the thing. iPhones are made of iPhone. When this is done, you just make another iPhone out of it. Reprocessing isn't 100% efficient, but if you're designing things to last as long as possible and you're maximizing output, it starts to become less of an issue. And so that's where we get our good friend landfills involved. Landfills are full of the stuff that our stuff is made out of. They're local mines of what we already need. They're just these like useful piles of trash. And speaking of useful piles of trash, local government. As we relocalize, we can start to be more masters of our own destiny in our community and engage in a more active way. An example technology, by the way, biomining. It's microbes that eat the material that isn't the material you want. So you put, say, an old cell phone in, it eats out the non-valuable and leaves you with gold. 1 metric ton of cell phones has substantially more gold in it than 1 metric ton of gold ore. So we have this whole community set up going, and that's where we come into the grander ideas. And part of these grander ideas is this concept of the multiplicity. So as you can see here, productivity, this only goes back to the 70s. You go back to the 40s, this is an even more drastic increase. Productivity has been skyrocketing. There's a gap in compensation, so that's one of those economic reforms we got to get going on. But this is about half of it comes from technology. And as we get technology that is exponentially better, this concept grows exponentially, especially when, say, the tools we're using get better at being the tools we're using while we get better at using them. So productivity starts to skyrocket, and from there we can reassess what we're using this productivity for. Remember AEV's end of I need to own, end of consumerism? That's what this phenomenon is going to right now, is just like whatever they sell on infomercials, okay? But if this is going towards our necessities, there's a lot left over to start exploring grander works that are more attuned to, say, passions than survival. You know, we can start to use this phenomenon and, you know, maybe even collate, you know, if we're gonna need all these job programs anyway, maybe collate some kind of, you know, like national association for scientists and artists, or I don't know, come up with a name later. Oh, NASA, that's what we call it. So I call this the NASA 4 idea. Basically, there's a NASA for space, but but we can have a NASA for art. We used to call it the Federal Art Program. It was part of the WPA. Worked pretty well. And the reason why we would want this is you can use it for all sorts of things. You can use it for space travel. Space travel has actually been really helpful to humans. Things like heart pumps, smoke alarms, solar panels, advanced batteries, and the popularization, at the very least, of Velcro, the savior of the children's shoe industry, all came from solving problems that NASA faced during their missions. The important part behind this is that you're solving problems in a way where you have very limited resources and very limited people power, so you have to maximize everything. So you get that, say, Martian soil is really hard to grow crops in. So is a lot of environmentally damaged soil in America. And then you say, hey, what about a floating city in the ocean to study the ocean? You're gonna have to figure out water management pretty quickly if everything around you is salt water. Local art, I mean, that speaks for itself. Maintaining our national parks and growing our environmental reclamation, and again, national art, all of this can become what work is. And then as we're sort of having this societal safety net, so everyone's kind of, they've got their necessities, you provide the ultimate incentive to work by making it the most fun option, right? If you can just collect your necessities, sure, you might lounge around, but if there's nothing to do, you'll find something to do. Even if it's working at, 5 or 10 hours a week in your local community on the urban farm or in government complaining about something. By the way, if you ever had a problem and thought, or cause you really want to dedicate yourself to, and thought, if I had the time, I go and protest and I this and I hammer on people's desks, but you don't because you got to do blah, blah, blah. That's not an issue. We get to have a much more representative and participatory government and communities as a whole. So this establishes a framework for a new kind of work, a work that is fulfilling to our souls and is the thing people want to do. They decide for themselves to do it. And I'd like to end not by saying goodbye, but with a quote from the greatest written work of all time, Futurama, and say, welcome to the world of tomorrow.